Bam. All right, what's up going on, everybody? We're here, we're live. Welcome to a brand new Poker Live podcast. After some delay, I'm switching around a bunch of things. We're here, we're live. We're joined today, unfortunately, not on video, but as you can see by the very fancy graphic I have here in the corner right here. Everybody, we're here, we're live. We are joined by a man who is a legend of the poker world, the legendary voice of the World Poker Tour for many, many years. And he recently took down the World Poker Tour Montreal Championship, where he won the sickest championship belt I've ever seen in my life. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about some old school stories, I'm sure. And yeah, man, we're joining the podcast today by Mike Sexton. Mike, what's going on? Sorry for the delay, man. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, glad to be on it.
Yeah, guys, we were Mike's not joining us on video today, so I had to switch around kind of how I have my setup here, and I put the wrong settings in wrong, so now we're here. Hopefully people can kind of find their way over here. But yeah, Mike, kind of for people out there, I feel like almost all of my audience will know who you are, but let's say that somebody was a poker player and didn't know much about you. What would be like do you even have a 30-second thing you'd say at this point, just because you've been involved in poker for so long?
Yeah, no, I just say, just my whole career has been poker. I started as a pro back in 1977, probably 20-some years. I just literally played poker for a living, never had a paycheck. And then toward the end of the 90s, the late 90s, I put on a big event called the Tournament of Champions of Poker and sort of transitioned over to the business side of poker. Putting that event on led me to my jobs with Party Poker and the World Poker Tour, and those two things actually, changed the poker world forever, honestly. And online poker got big, and we know what the World Poker Tour has done in terms of global expansion of poker and changing the game as we know it. I mean, before the World Poker Tour came around, you couldn't find a no-limit hold'em game in any casino in the world on a regular basis. And then, because that was the event that was played on television, everybody started playing no-limit hold'em, and now that's the primary game in every casino. So it's a big difference in terms of what the World Poker Tour has done for poker, and obviously it caused the poker explosion.
So you started playing in 1977.
I started playing a lot sooner than that, but in 1977 was when I quit my job. I had a sales job for about 3.5 years, and I quit that job after I got divorced. Probably played too much poker, but after I got divorced, I was playing all these home games at night and making more money than I was making on my job. I loved playing, never got tired of playing. And I said, I'm single again. I'm just going to quit the job and just play poker. And if I get broke, I'll just go get another job. So literally that's what I did. And I didn't ever have another job or another paycheck for 20-some years.
That sounds like you could have told that story. Yeah, it sounds like you could have told that story from 2008. I didn't know in 1977 people were playing so much poker that it was leading. I mean, it makes sense. It leads, obviously it leads to relationships, kind of, things happen. But man, I don't even know anyone else that's started playing poker professionally in 1977, and then you just 20 years straight, huh?
I lived in North Carolina and just played in home games. I ran a game 2 days a week and went to games the other days of the week, and traveled around North Carolina, went up to Virginia Beach a little bit, and Roanoke Rapids, and all throughout North Carolina, and it was fantastic. I just loved those games. And then finally in 1984, I went out to the World Series for the first time, played 3 events, because the events were only once every other day back in those days. Mm-hmm. So in a week's time, you could only play in 3 tournaments. And I made 2 final tables, and I said, if I want to be a poker player, probably it's time for me to move to Las Vegas. And so in January of '85, I moved to Las Vegas and been there ever since.
That's fucking crazy, man. That's crazy. I know a little bit about your backstory. Kind of up until I kind of know it from a little bit from the party poker days, because I know you've done a couple podcasts and done a bunch of stuff over the years. So, but this older school part, man, that's so. I guess the home games back in the day, are these a dangerous home games? Are people getting robbed? How do you even find the home games in North Carolina in 1977?
Yeah, I mean, it's just word of mouth. You play in one game, then you go to another one, and it's amazing when I think about it now, because truthfully, the games that I played in were just like the so safe, and it's weird. I ran a game in an apartment in North Carolina for 8 or 10 years, and everybody in town knew about the game. It's where the bookmaker settled up with all, everybody every week on Mondays after the game, so there was money there. Yet the game never got robbed, never got busted. It's literally the eighth wonder of the world when I look back on it now and think that all that time went by, and we were never robbed, never busted. The game was never cheated, and it was just a fantastic experience at the time. And probably because the bookmakers had so much juice in town, I don't know, but nobody messed with us. I know that.
Incredible. Do you still know any people that you played poker with back in that day? Do you still play with them at all?
Yeah, sadly, a lot of them have died off. Yeah, a lot of them have died off since then. But I just can't tell you how much fun those games were to play in. When one game ended, I just couldn't wait till the next day to start and go back and play in another game. I mean, I just loved playing, and we had a rule back there in most of the games that if you could explain it, you could deal it. So, we played all these wild games too, and crisscross and replace a card, and just games other people probably never heard of. But it really did make you a better poker player. Playing in multiple games, I do think has helped me in my poker career, no doubt about it. And I think all poker players, especially those that are professional players, if they just play one game, like No Limit Hold'em, for example, I think they really restrict themselves in earning opportunities, and they become a better player if you play multiple games. And all the high-stakes games in Las Vegas are multiple games, and there's a reason for that. So my advice would be to try to play a few games if you're a professional poker player and master them, because back in the day, you could walk in a casino or somewhere, and maybe there's some guys from a convention in town that are playing 7-card stud. Well, you might not play 7-card stud, so you missed out on that game. But if you were good at anything, you could play, whether it's pot limit Omaha, whether it was stud high-low split, whether it was no limit hold'em, whether it was whatever the game might be. I think if you're a pro, you should be able to play it and sit down and play with the amateur players and the recreational players where you can make some money.
Yeah, I wonder if that's more unique to live than online. Because online, I was always a big proponent of, when I tried mixing pot limit Omaha with no limit hold'em, I could never really get past a certain point. But when I just started focusing on just the one game and I stopped, focusing on different game types and playing different things, that's when I truly started to really excel. But I guess at live, it's going to be different because, as you mentioned, you might play with different amateur players who, they want to play this or they want to play that, or it's, as you mentioned, it's mixed games. So I guess in live...
Yeah, and in live, you don't play multiple games at once when you're playing live. So you play one game, then the game will switch in 10 hands or 8 hands, and then you go to the next game. So, you don't play multiple games at once when you play live. So, that makes it a little bit easier.
Interesting. So how are you even learning back in the day? Because you're learning these new game types, and there's obviously, I don't think there was many training materials. There's obviously no internet. There's no a training site that has videos for every single possible game. And so what was your process like for getting better at some of these games?
The process was simple. If you went to a poker game and you came home broke, you scratched your head and you tried to figure out how you got broke, and you had to figure it out for yourself. There were no books, as you said, no learning tools, back then, just like today's players, you had somebody whose game you respected, and you talked to them about certain hands or certain ways you played things and something you might have done different. And certainly I don't think there's a better learning tool than that, even today, than discussing hands with people's game that you respect, where they might give you a different alternative of how you should have played it. Maybe you should have called here. Maybe you should have raised. Maybe you should have bet a smaller amount. But there's different ways that you can certainly learn by discussing hands and what happened with somebody whose game you respected, and that's what we did back in those days as well. So, but for the most part, you really, you just had to learn on your own back then. I mean, that's just the way it was, and you learn by the seat of your pants, and experience was your teacher.
I think you're very spot on about that, having a group of friends, or maybe even their online friends or live friends, or having people you can actually talk poker with is super helpful, super valuable, and especially when you're learning the game and getting better at the game. I think that's probably one of the most important things you can really have around you. So.
No doubt about it. I firmly believe that if you have an opportunity to discuss poker all the time with somebody, you're going to become a much better player. I mean, it's why the young players today do so well. They live, breathe, eat, sleep poker 24 hours a day, and all they're doing is talking about hands. And discussing what maybe they should have done and how they could have got more value out of my hand, or maybe they could have got away from my hand some kind of way. And that is how you get better, no doubt about it, and that's why they're so good.
Guys, we are live here on YouTube. I know we got a few new people in the chat. What's going on? Welcome to the Poker Live podcast. If this is your first time here, I appreciate you tuning in. For Mike Sexton, shout out to everybody at the WPT. I have a couple friends that work there: Donnie Peters, Ginge, McLean. You guys are watching. Much love. Hope you guys are doing well out in California. So, let's talk about the WPT Montreal WIN here. And I mean, it seems pretty incredible for me seeing the voice of WPT holding up the championship belt. I mean, that's pretty amazing. It seems like you got a lot of really good feedback from the community, and a lot of people were very happy to see you take that one down.
Yeah, it definitely was a popular win. Certainly with the World Poker Tour crew, anyway, they were pulling for me, and I could feel their love, and it was fun, And Vince and I weren't allowed to play on the World Poker Tour. We couldn't play any of the events the first 7 or 8 years that the WPT was in existence. The guy that created it, Steve Lipscomb, just felt like, if we made a final table or won a tournament, somebody might think it was fixed, and blah blah blah. But when they started to renew the casino partners' contracts, they had a 10-year contract to start with, and up in about season 8, they were going around starting to renew them. And one of the perks that they provided the casinos was that, they would bring the talent in from day one throughout the whole event, because for the first 7 years, Vince and I flew in the day before the final table, basically, and flew out the day after in most cases. And but then that changed, and when we started going on day one and staying for the whole week, they said, you guys can go ahead and play in the tournaments if you want to. And, the players didn't mind then because there were 2 old guys. I figured we were dead money, so they were happy to have us. And anyway, we started playing some, and I play a little bit more than Vince does. But, but for the first number of years, we couldn't play. So, it's fun to play. I mean, I still enjoy playing tournaments because, I don't have to grind out a living playing anymore like I did for 25 years. So, to me, it's just really fun when I get a chance to play now. And I like to compete against the young studs and the young guns and see how I can match my game up with them. And, I've been very fortunate that I've seen every final table on the televised WPT events since the tour started. So I see who's winning. I see why they're winning. I see how sharp they are, and just how many more good players there are now than there were in yesteryear. And it's tough out there. I have the utmost respect for anybody that can make it out there, can make a living, playing tournament poker for a living. I'll tell you, it is tough.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend that works for the World Series of Poker, and I told her I was going to have you on, and she's like, man, I wish we could play in the World Series of Poker events. And she was like, she was asking about WPT people playing. I said, I mean, like, why? I don't know. It just makes so much sense for you and for Vince to be able to play in the event. I mean, you got a lot of fans. Like, people have been watching WPT for so long. I think they probably really enjoy playing with you guys. I think it just makes it. I feel like it just makes it a better experience.
Yeah.
Like, you go to an event and you're like, yeah, man, Mike Sexton was at my table, dude. Like, I don't know. I feel like that just seems really like
yeah.
It makes sense.
It's definitely a win-win situation, and the players like playing with us. It makes for a better show because most of the time we've played somewhere along the tournament with the guys that make it to the final table, so we have a much better, perspective of their game and how they're playing and how they got there, and so it makes for a better show. It's better for the casino properties to have us around, so it's really a win-win for everybody.
Have you heard any backlash from people saying, "Oh, you guys are like," people get upset that you guys play, or for the most part, does no one really mind?
No, I really don't hear that much. I mean, there may be a few out there that I don't hear it from that say it, but if there is, it's a very, very, very small percentage, I can promise you. If you took a poll among the players, I believe 99% would welcome us in the tournament and want us to play, and so I don't think it's an issue. Mm-hmm. And certainly, it's fun to play and get to the final tables. This is the 3rd one that I've made on the World Poker Tour, and the 3rd time was a charm, so that was great for me.
Yeah, you took that one down. I think it was 468,000, I believe. It might be Canadian, so that might actually be like 250,000. Sorry, Canada. The 80's dropping.
It's 400 some thousand Canadian. Yeah, which equates to about 317,000 US the time you factor it in, I think. So, but still, the money's nice, and obviously it's very nice to win. But when you play tournament poker, winning is what it's all about. Honestly, I mean, money comes and goes, but having your name on that Champions Cup as long as you live, always being recognized as a WPT champion or a World Series of Poker bracelet winner. When you're 80 in your rocking chair, looking back at the memories you had in your career, what's going to pop up there is the ones that you won, and not where you finished second, third, fourth, sixth, whatever it is, but and they're few and far between. And I don't care how great a poker player you are, getting to those final tables is tough, and winning them is even tougher. And it just doesn't happen that often. I mean, it just does not happen that often. So, at my age, of course, you really appreciate it because you know how tough it is to get there, and you don't know how many more chances you're going to have. So, I appreciate it extra special. And, of course, for me, to win a WPT title means now I'm eligible to play in the WPT Tournament of Champions, which is really special to me because I created the original Tournament of Champions of poker back in the 90s, which I still believe was the greatest event in poker history. And then I end up winning the WSOP Tournament of Champions and $1 million back in 2006. So now I'm going to have a chance for the trifecta here, where I have a chance to win the WPT Tournament of Champions because I'm now a WPT title holder. So that's cool for me.
All right. So how do you create something that's now stuck around poker for so long? Because really not many people can say like, hey, I just created this thing and it's awesome and it's still around being used this day. Like what was the process like for the Tournament of Champions concept?
Well, the process for me was simple. Back in the day, I always looked at golf and the Tournament of Champions of golf, and where you had to win a PGA Tour event to get to play in the Tournament of Champions during that calendar year. So I wanted to put the same thing on for poker, where you couldn't just come up and buy in like you do every other tournament in the poker world, Mm-hmm. You had to earn your way in. You had to qualify. And to do that, I set a prerequisite that you had to win a $200 buy-in or higher at some point during the calendar year that had at least 40 players in it. And so I put on this Tournament of Champions, and I wanted it to be a multiple game, not just a no-limit hold'em tournament like every other event was. So that's what I did, and everybody said, oh, you'll never get that on. People won't play the multiple games. But I knew in my heart that if they qualified for my Tournament of Champions, they'd want to play in it, A, and B, if they didn't know how to play the other games, they'd learn them before the Tournament of Champions took place, and that was the case. And, I look back on it now, and, I think we had like 685 players the first year that I put it on, which might not seem like a big number in today's terms, but back then, to give you an idea, 2 months earlier than my first Tournament of Champions, the main event at the World Series of Poker had 398 players in it. So I nearly doubled the size of the main event of the World Series of Poker with my Tournament of Champions. So I was always proud of that.
So where'd the money come from for that Tournament of Champions?
Well, I had a $2,000 buy-in for the players so they could afford to play it. And a lot of casinos held events where they qualified and took the entry fee out for the winner so they'd be eligible to play in the Tournament of Champions. And but the players put up the money for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was thinking it might be like a free roll type of situation. But if players, so the people who qualify that are champions, they still have to put up a buy-in to get into the event. So I get that all people, I would imagine a lot of people probably didn't have 2K.
Yeah. Oh, it was a free roll, an independent decision. You could play in it or not, but you could only play if you were eligible to play. So that was the key. But in my mind, I knew if people were eligible to play, that they would play. Now, I had one thing that I tweaked on that back in those days, because to put on the greatest event in poker, which was what I was after at that time, I knew you had to get the biggest players in the game to play. And all the high-stakes players, like Chip Reese, like Doral Brunson, like Billy Baxter, like all these, icons in the poker world, well, they don't play many tournaments, a year. There's a good chance they wouldn't win one during the calendar year. So I put a perk out there that anybody that had ever won a World Series of Poker bracelet was eligible to play in my Tournament of Champions. So it meant that winning a bracelet at the World Series would now make you eligible for my event for life. And, that turned out to be a very good thing, because then all the high-stakes poker players played in it. Everybody played in the tournament, and it was just fantastic. But that's how I got the high-stakes players in there. And then I made Doyle the host of my event for the first year. Doyle Brunson hosted it, and I knew that would bring all the players as well. So it worked out really well.
I can tell you took a very...
Other than I never made money in it. I held it 3 years. I didn't make any money with it, but it did lead me to my jobs with Party Poker and the World Poker Tour. So putting it on obviously changed my life considerably.
Yeah, shout out to Donnie Peters, by the way. He, I asked him for a couple of things, and he said that you used to live with Chip Reese and Danny Robinson, I think before or during you got into high-stakes gambling.
Well, actually, those guys were the biggest players in Las Vegas back in the day, back in the 70s, and I grew up with Danny Robinson, so we were best of friends. And he and Chip had a nice house here in Vegas. He was always inviting me out. So in 1977, I came out for the first time and stayed with those guys in this bachelor pad. And I'm watching these guys in the high-stakes poker world now. I wasn't a high-stakes player at all because I didn't have any money back then. But just because I knew them and got to hang around them, I became very close with all the high-stakes poker players in Las Vegas, with Puggy Pearson, with Stu Ungar, with Doyle Brunson, and with all these guys because of my association with them. Because it's hard to get in that circle. You can't get in that circle unless you played in those games back in those days. But I cracked it because I was good friends with them and then ended up becoming good friends with all the high-stakes players. So for me, it was just a blessing that, I was close to Chip and Danny, and that led me to my ties with all the other high-stakes players.
Mm. It sounds like you were doing some very, very good networking from long ago. It sounds like you've been doing that for quite a long time.
Yeah, no, I did very good networking, and, because of guys like Stu Ungar and Puggy Pearson, and, guys always knew I could play poker, so, when I came to Vegas, I never ever worried about going broke, and, because of that, I was reckless in the sports book, and I bet a lot of sports. I stayed broke all my life betting sports, to tell you the truth. But, I could always get in action because of my access to those guys. I could always borrow $5,000 and get back in action, or $10,000 or whatever it took. Or they would stake me in something and, where I could play and they'd get a piece. And, I often wonder if that hurt me long term, that I had that kind of access to being able to stay in action all the time. Whereas if I just moved to Las Vegas on my own and knew nobody, you have to protect your bankroll, and if you ever run out of money, you're dead meat, but that was never the case with me, and I never worried about going broke because I knew I could get back in action, which I did, and was always in action, even when I didn't have any money. So, for me, it worked out well, but it worked out well in my poker career, but, it caused me to blow a lot of money, betting on sports that maybe I wouldn't have done if I'd had to manage my own money.
Really interesting you say that. Because I kind of look at online, or people online poker. A lot of people get staked, and I always say that I think that getting staked it makes sense in tournaments and cash games. It makes sense when people get staked, but I feel like it kind of does build up that habit of maybe not having to build up your money on your own, and therefore you don't really you learn things when you build up money on your own. You grind it up there, you go broke, you have absolutely no money, you build it back up again, that's kind of what happened with me. And I always feel like that really helped me a lot, and that was valuable experience to have to do that. And now, as I've gotten a little bit different in the poker world and I've had more success, now that I have access, I can always, as you mentioned before, you can always borrow, you can always get in action. I almost feel like that might be a bad thing because, as you mentioned, it's sometimes maybe you don't try as hard to fix these leaks that you have. And that's really interesting, though, that you said that, because I know that you still sports bet, though, up until you still sports bet now, or is that something that you've recently quit? Or
I do it moderately now, but I used to be gung ho and crazy about it and bet way more money than I had because it's something you could do with no money. You just bet bookmakers, and then you settle up with them later, and even if you're broke, they were never worried about me paying them because they knew I'd always make a score playing poker, and so. That was my case, and it's something I'm not proud of and something I'd warn everybody against. But, there were a lot of players back in the day that were much more gamblers than they are today. I mean, today's players are much smarter. Back in the old day, virtually all the poker players, in fact, the World Series of Poker was started, not because of poker, but because the Benians wanted to lure high rollers to Las Vegas. They used poker as an excuse, but it's the money they went off in the pit where they really made their money. So back in the day, most big-time poker players were big-time gamblers, and I didn't care what it was. They all bet on sports big. Some of them bet big in the pit. Some of them bet big on the horses. But most of them back in the early days were gamblers and used to like to gamble on other things besides just poker. But nowadays, the college-educated kids and the smart kids, they don't venture into the pit anywhere near like they used to. So, it's times are changed. They're different. Kids are smarter today about managing their money and not going off in certain areas. And, it's very, very tough to stay in money if you have any leaks at all. And, Bobby Bolden told me years and years ago that, if you're a great poker player, you might can have one leak and survive, whether it's betting on sports or whether it's going to titty bars or whether it's going in the pit. But if you have more than one, he said you have zero chance of surviving Las Vegas anyway, because it's a 24-hour town that will gobble you up. So, I always remember that. And I've only had one leak in my entire lifetime. I never bet horses. I never went off in the pit. I never blew money, going to nightclubs and all that kind of stuff. But, one was all it took for me to stay broke because, the sports did it for me. But it's something that I just love doing. And, I was just horrible at it. I never studied it. I just picked games. And, it's just too tough to beat, when you're laying the juice. So it's hard to do, and I wouldn't recommend anybody do it. But, we live and learn, as we say. And, hopefully it, if and when I come back into big money again, and this certainly helped win this tournament, that I've learned my lesson, and I won't go through it again like I used to.
Interesting. So you feel like you still haven't conquered this then? You still, this is something that you're still actively trying to get figured out in yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I've always think I've conquered it, but, obviously, maybe I haven't, or maybe I didn't for a long time. But it's something I always felt that I could. I always felt I could quit. But the truth is, there's nothing I enjoy more than watching the games on the weekend and having action on all of them that are on TV. So, it's just a hobby of mine that I love doing, and I love watching it. And, it'd be boring to watch to me. I can't even imagine watching a game if I didn't have a bet on.
I guess now you just bet less.
But I feel the same way about playing golf. I can't imagine playing golf for free, To me, it's got to mean something if you make a 4-foot putt or a 10-foot putt or something. And, if it means nothing, what difference does it make if you make it or not, It's just a challenge maybe. But, for me, playing golf, the fun of playing golf is matching up and having some action on the game. So, that's just my lifestyle is a gamble. I wrote a book called Life's a Gamble, in fact, and it tells a lot of those stories about gambling on the golf course and gambling and the history of poker. And I'd recommend to all your listeners get a copy of it if they like poker, if they like golf, if they like gambling of any kind. I promise you, Life's a Gamble is a book that they will thoroughly enjoy reading. It is a fun read.
I mean, I got to say, I've only heard really positive recommendations for it when people mention the book to me. So I definitely suggest people check it out. I mean, man, Mike, I guess you don't know these things about you, man. You don't know that man, that's pretty wild. It's pretty wild stuff. I know I heard when I told No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, the people that just know me as a TV commentator, don't really know the history of the past. How would they? I mean, they wouldn't know it. The young internet guys, they wouldn't know that I actually played poker for a living for 25 years before I even got that job. And, guys wouldn't even know that kind of stuff. How would they know it? But, I've been, I've seen the gambling world in and out, and I've seen the best at it, and I've seen it gobble people up. And, I've seen it even on the World Poker Tour. I've seen guys that win big tournaments, where they win $1 million or $500,000 or something like that. And then all of a sudden they think they're way better players than they are, and they jump into bigger games. And next thing you know, they go broke, and they didn't take money out for their taxes, and they have IRS issues. And it's so tough when you make a big score nowadays. You better manage your money because the big scores don't come around that often. And in between big scores, you've got to make it last, and you got to stretch it out. And so many players now just play tournaments, which just boggles my mind, honestly, because I would think if you're a professional poker player that you get knocked out of a tournament, you're in town another day or two, before your plan leaves, why wouldn't you play cash games to earn your money back for your entry fees? And, but many of them just stick to tournament poker, which is mind-boggling to me that they wouldn't play cash games as well. Now, some do, obviously. A number of them do, but many nowadays just come to town, play the tournament, and go back home again. So it's sort of strange. And you were talking about getting staked before. I mean, obviously now they have some stake deals that players can sell pieces themselves and play tournaments in. But I can remember back in the day, Chip Reese told me one time, he said, if you're a winning poker player, why would you ever want to get staked? Why would you want to give up half your money to somebody else, for example,
Right.
And if you're a winning player, you shouldn't want to do that, And I can remember, if you played 15 and 30 poker, it was all limit poker back in the day, or 20 and 40 poker, where the games are a little bit juicier, but players would want to play 50 and 100, so they'd piece themselves out to somebody, where in essence their end is only 15 and 30. So it never made sense to me why you'd want to get staked in a higher game, which the games are tougher than you would. The percentage is going to be the same for you playing on your own in a 15-30 game, but it's just ego. Players want to play in bigger games, and but it's crazy when you think about it. And you're far better off if you're a winning player just to use your own money and get 100% of yourself instead of piece yourself out, because really all you're doing is giving up some of your earnings to somebody else.
I agree with that. I also can agree with, I can see other people's side of things. A lot of people, especially tournament players, might not have much money. They might want to play 10Ks. They might be in a lot of
that's
makeup.
Totally different. No, if you're broke, if you don't have any money, or even if you have some money, but you recognize the volatility and how few times you win in tournament poker if somebody's willing to stake you, where you don't put up your own money, then that's a great thing too. And if your game is good enough where that can happen, that's good for you. So, there are certain situations where it's good to get staked, and then others where it might not be wise of you to get staked. So,
yeah, I think cash games are a little bit different.
I know this. Guys that get staked, I've seen them get staked, and basically when you stake people in tournaments, you continue to stake them where they have a makeup figure, and finally the makeup figure gets so big that the player now changes his style of play during the tournament, and now he gets more reckless because he understands the only way he's ever going to get any money back if he comes in the top 3 places in the tournament, for example. So he's not looking to cash or to get to the final table to knock off some of that debt, for example. For him to get in the plus, he might have to win or come in second in the tournament or something, and it does change your play. I promise you it changes a guy's play when the only way he's going to make a score is if he's got to get a big number. So, that's a factor as well. And, if you know that about somebody when they're playing in a tournament, you can adjust your play accordingly.
Guys in the chat are asking for, they're asking for the biggest degen story. So I've heard a story related to party poker and how you came to be with party poker and then sort of making money from party poker and then spending money from party poker. So you feel like that's your biggest kind of degen story?
No, it was for sure. I mean, I promise you there's not many players, not many people in the entire world. It's not a long list of those that have made more money than I have in the poker world. And, I made a lot of money with party poker when I sold my stock in that. And, then I made investments. I gave a lot away, and I started betting way higher on the sports, instead of betting 500 or a dime or 2 dimes a game. Next thing I know, I was betting 20,000 a game, 50,000 a game, 100,000 a game, and it was insane looking back on it now. And I don't care how much money you have when you're betting that kind of money on the whole sheet on a Saturday and Sunday. You're not going to stay in money. And I didn't. I went through a lot, and every piece of I bought houses in Vegas at the highest time in the market, houses in California the highest time, condos in Florida, all that kind of stuff. And I lost money on everything. And so I didn't manage it well. I gave it away, and it was just bad timing in the real estate world. And so, but a lot of it I just pissed off, honestly, and betting on sports and elsewhere. And so, it was dumb looking back on it now, but, I totally understand how athletes who come up in in a tough community and all of a sudden come into multi-millions, by signing a professional contract that in a couple of years' time, or by the time they retire, they're already broke. And, I understand it because it happened to me. And I was in the same boat, and, all of a sudden came into giant money when I never had any giant money. But, I always lived good. But, once you have giant money, everything's relative.
Mm-hmm.
If you got more and bet more, it doesn't make any difference. Eventually they're going to get you. And that's what happened to me.
So when you sold off your stock in Party Poker, how much did you get for that?
Well, I got $15 million when I sold my stock, and then when they went public, I got another $15 million. So it's a pretty good little score.
Wow, that's wild. Can you tell the story about how exactly that came to be, where you became the like a stockholder in Party Poker?
Yeah, it came to be because I got a call Christmas week of 2000. I was playing in a poker tournament in Atlantic City. And a guy called me on the phone from Toronto, Canada, that I'd known because he had sent some players that had cashed in my Tournament of Champions where they take 30% out of the top. This guy's business was to get the tax money back for them. So I had known him through my Tournament of Champions. So he calls me, and he said, "Are you associated with an online poker site?" I said, "No, not really." He said, "Well, I've got some people. They're going to start up a site. I think you'd be perfect. They're looking for a face of their site and a domain expert and all that. And could I be your agent?" I said, "You could be my agent." He said, "Yeah, like a baseball agent, get a piece or something." So I laughed. I said, "Well, let's see what it is. It depends." So anyway, he set up a meeting with me for 2 days later, incidentally. And I was in Atlantic City flying back to Vegas the next day. This was like 3 days before Christmas. And he said, "Can you meet a lady at Bellagio tomorrow named Ruth Parasol? They have online gaming company where they deal blackjack and have slots and stuff and a couple of online sites, and they're looking to start up a poker site. And they're looking for a poker domain expert, and I think you're perfect." I said, "Well, sure, I'll meet." So he said, "Get your resume together," and blah, blah, blah. So 2 days later, I met this lady at Bellagio at noon, and the first thing she said to me, put all the bios and the resumes and put all that aside. She looked me right in the eye and she says, "If we hire you, can you be in India in a week's time?" Now, this was Christmas, I said, "Can I be in India in a week's time?" She said, "That's where our software developers are, and you need to go there because you're going to have to tell them, how to play the games and what to do, et cetera, et cetera." And I said, "Look," I said, "I'll be honest." I said, "I don't know anything about computers or software. I just know poker." She said, "You don't have to worry about that. They know about all that. And if you tell them what to do, they can do it." And I said, "Well," I said, "if you hire me," I said, "I'm single." I said, "Yes, I can be there in 10 days' time." And I said, "But what's the job?" And she said, "You're going to help develop the software for the site. You're going to be the face of the site. You're going to write the rules of the site and blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Okay." She said, "Well, what do you want?" Now, I thought she was going to tell me what the salary was and what this was and what that was, and she didn't, And I said, "Well," I said, "I want a piece of the site." I said, "I want a bonus if it does well, and I'll need a salary of," I said, $15,000 a month. And she didn't even bat an eye about any of that, And I said, "And I want some cash up front." I said, "I want $100,000 up front." Now, remember, I didn't have a penny at the time. I was basically broke, didn't have any money. I'd been in England with this other company that was considering starting up an online site for a few months, but I never got paid. I never did anything, and I could see they weren't going anywhere. So I came back to the States to play poker and forget about that. But I didn't want to go through all that again where I didn't get any money. So I said, I have to have $100,000 up front. So anyway, she said, "Okay, I'll get back to you tomorrow." So anyway, they get back to me, and they said, "We'll go along with everything. We'll give you a piece of the company. We'll give you the $15,000 a month. We'll give you a bonus if we do good, but we don't pay cash up front." Nobody in this business pays cash up front. Nobody knows if the site's going to work, if you're going to get any traffic to it, blah, blah, blah. So we can't pay you the $100,000. I said, "Well, then there's no deal." So then the agent calls me back, and he says, I know that they want you and all, but they said they can't do it. with paying the cash up front. I said, well, then tell them there's no deal. And I said, I'll tell you what. I said, if you get me the cash up front, I said, I'll give you $20,000 of the money. So he said, you want me to play hardball with them? I said, yeah, I'll play hardball with them. Because I didn't know who they were. I didn't know anything, you know. And so anyway, now they called me back. We made the deal under the condition that they paid me the $100,000 advance money, $10,000 a month for the next 10 months. So I agreed to that. So now instead of getting $15,000 a month, I got $25,000 a month from them for the first 10 months. I was in India a week later, and I sat down and met they only had about 40 people working for the entire company at that time, and nobody at the company was 30 years old. And I met 5 guys that had signed to set up to develop the poker site. And so I met this poker team, and I realized in 5 minutes' time that not one of them knew anything about poker. In fact, nobody in the company knew anything about poker. It wowed me that anybody could start up a poker site where nobody knew anything about poker. You know, they'd just been to conventions and heard that poker was the next biggest thing coming. They were going to just start an arm of their business in poker, and they never thought it was going to ever come close to anything like their casino business was doing. And, you know, it was just another branch for them. And so I told the poker team the same thing I told her. I said, look, I don't know anything about poker, about computers or software. I said, I know poker. And they said, if you tell us what to do, we can do it. And literally we started where I said, okay, player A has got the button. Player B is in the small blind. Player C is in the big blind. Player D has options A, B, and C. Player F has options A, B, C, and D. And literally, that's how we did it. And we did it for every game. We started with Hold'em, limit Hold'em, and then we went to 7-card stud, 7-card stud high-low, Omaha high-low. And we started with all limit poker. Even when we developed the site, it was limit poker. And then the CEO of the company, you know, I stayed there in India for 4 months. Their customer support was located in the Dominican Republic at the time. And then I had to fly down there to teach the customer support people about what poker players were going to complain about and about poker, because they knew nothing about it either. And then we launched Party Poker on August 1st of 2001. And so I was there from the beginning, and I was there when we launched. And we launched the site with just one table satellites to qualify people for the semifinals of the Party Poker Million, which was a tournament that I created where we were going to qualify 100 players from the site, take them on a cruise ship, give them $500 in cash, a luxurious cruise for 2, and allow them to play where the winner got $1 million. So that's how we launched Party Poker. It went well, and the next thing you know, we were the first ones to advertise on television, and we multiplied our business by 10 by doing that. And, you know, the rest is history, as they say. It's a business story that is just mind-boggling. These people had no outside investors, nothing. In less than 4 years' time, after launching Party Poker, from just a little poker site, they went public for $9 billion with a B. So it was massive money. And unfortunately for me, you know, about a year and a half before they went public, you know, I was the last shareholder in the U.S. They relinquished their citizenship. Ruth and her husband did, and moved to Gibraltar, of course. And, you know, it was still a gray area. Was it legal? Was it not legal? Blah, blah, blah. And then they offered to buy me out. And we negotiated a price, and they said they'd give me 10, you know, they said, what do you want for your stock? I said, what are you giving for it? And I didn't have access to the books or anything. You know, I just figured out what we made every day and just put a pencil to it real quick. And they said, no, you tell us what you want for it. I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll both write down a number on a piece of paper and see how far apart we are. And that's what we did. And on my piece of paper, I wrote down $15 million. And on their piece of paper, they wrote down $10 million. They said, oh, no, $15 million is way too much. And now, remember, I still didn't have any money. I was still broke. I was getting a salary, but, I mean, I basically didn't have any serious money. And but I said no, and I held my ground. I was going to hold out for the $15 million. And then finally they went out and had a meeting and came back in and said, okay, we're going to give you the $15 million, but we're going to give you $5 million in cash and give you $2 million a year over each of the next 5 years. But to get that money, you have to still, you know, be an employee of this Party Poker, and you can't go off on any other site and blah, blah. So really it was very smart on their part, because they hooked me up for another 5 years. In fact, I'm still a consultant with Party Poker, even though those owners are long gone with their money. And so by selling my stock early, it cost me about $500 million probably. But what's $500 million here and there?
What the fuck?
So, but I did good. I never regretted it.
Wow.
I was never,
Wow.
It never really bothered me. To me, it was like playing a hand of poker. If you might have the 7-5 of diamonds, for example, and the pot's been raised and re-raised in front of you, so you throw your hand away. And now the flop comes out 8-6-4. And both those players flop the set, where now you're going to triple up, if you knew what was coming. Well, back then, you didn't know what was coming. You didn't know UIGEA could have come into play a year and a half before it did. And then I'd have shot myself because I didn't take the $15 million when I could have had it, and I ended up with nothing, So, I never regretted the decision at the time. You make the best decision at the time for what you think is best. I thought it would be enough money to last me forever anyway, and it should have been, incidentally. And but that's how it all came about, and that's how I was a shareholder from the get-go when we started the site. So I got 6% right off the go, and that's how that happened.
Well, you guys asked for a story. Now you got to go buy the book. Life's a gamble. You got to. How can you guys not buy the book now?
Yeah.
And
honestly, people that read the book, or honestly, they say the chapter on party poker is the most interesting story in the book because it's a business story that really not many people know about outside the poker community, really. And I've done seminars at Harvard Business School and the Ohio State Fisher School of Business and some other places. And when I tell them this story, of how this little company, from just a poker site, the day they went public, became bigger than British Airways, became bigger than MasterCard. I'm talking about the day they went public. The company was bigger than those iconic companies that have been around for a long time. It really opens up their eyes, and people just can't even believe it when they hear it for the first time, And it's an amazing story of success. The company grew faster than Microsoft. It was an amazing success story, the party poker story, I can tell you. And when we left the U.S., because we were a publicly traded company at the time, and the lawyers, at the time, we were making $2.2 million a day from the poker site, which was enormous. We had 58% of the entire poker market. That included Poker Stars and Full Tilt and Ultimate Bet and all the rest of them on the other side. It only added up to 42%. Party poker literally was the Coca-Cola, of online poker back in the day. Now, people not know it now because they came on after 2006 when we left the U.S., which was the vast majority of our business and our customers. But, sadly, the lawyers had told the owners, and, the four of them have all become billionaires. And they said, look, we don't think that you're doing anything illegal, but if it's deemed that you are, the shareholders can sue you, or you can lose back your billions that you've already made. So, unfortunately, they had no choice in their mind but to leave rather than jeopardize all the billions that they had made. So, we continued party poker, but, the vast majority of our business was U.S. customers at that time. And, it's just a very unfortunate story that, that being on top of the world like we were and then had to leave the U.S. market and then start over from a very small percentage of worldwide customers. And now I'm proud to say, and I'm still a consultant with Party Poker today, and I just love the direction they're taking Party Poker, and they've been growing, and they've grown over 20% in the last year, and I think they're going to continue to grow in the next few years. So it's exciting to see the direction they're going and putting on these big tournaments with big guarantees, and where a guy can qualify on day one online and then go to the event on day two and get in. And they're doing some unique things that poker players actually really love and appreciate, and they're really looking out for the players now, which is great.
Yeah, in 2016, it's not common for sites to look out for the players, it seems like. So, I just saw Party Poker had you're down in Punta Cana right now. We talked about this before, but they qualified, 400 players. They flew them on the big Party Poker plane down to the event down there. It looked pretty awesome, the shot that I saw of all the people huddled in front of the plane.
Yeah, and it's incredible. It's a $2,500 buy-in tournament that all these players won packages for, basically, and with the expenses and the trip and the entry fee in the tournament, and they're guaranteeing $2 million for this prize pool. So, you need 800 players to make that number, And here we are on a little island down there in the Caribbean, and yet they take that kind of risk, to guarantee those kind of prize pools. And, you really have to admire them. And, fortunately, Dusk Till Dawn, the largest poker room in England, is paired up with them and, put this event on as well. And so it's been a great pairing. And, they put on a lot of events around England now in the last year. The Grand Prix Poker Tour, where guys can qualify online for a very small amount of money and just £100, and yet they guarantee £250,000 in these tournaments that they have. And it's worked out great. And they put them on all the famous soccer stadiums all across England. And they put on about 6 or 8 of those over the course of the year, had some online, and it was really fantastic. And the players loved it, and they're growing because of it, and they should be. And rather than advertise on billboards or buses, they'd rather give the money back to the players in extra bonuses, rakebacks, or put on these lavish tournaments for them and give them entry fees into that. So, they much prefer keeping the money in the poker community rather than on a billboard or a bus or something else, where they're advertising the site where it doesn't spike up, and they spike up business by giving money back to the players, and players appreciate that.
So you've always stayed, essentially, kind of, whether a consultant or working with them, you've always stayed with Party Poker pretty much throughout that entire time?
Yeah, I've only been with Party Poker, and, it's funny, it's like your baby, because I developed it, and I created it, and I helped get it going, and, so even after the original owner's gone, they wanted me to stay on as a consultant, and of course I had to stay on for 5 more years to collect the $2 million a year, so I did that, and then even after that period of time, I stayed on as a consultant, and I still am today, and, I'm proud to be an ambassador for them, and I like the direction they're heading.
Lee Jam says in the chat, what's up, Lee? I'm going to go invest my entire role in Party Poker stocks. Do you have any stocks?
I'll tell you, it might not be a bad, honestly, it might not be a bad idea to put some in it, because I see the site just continuing to grow.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some room out there for a site to kind of take hold of that second place and maybe even move. Obviously, PokerStar is going to be hard to top because, they're kind of a monster, but I feel like there's certainly a place right now that players are looking for a site that really cares about the players and isn't just trying to rake as much as they can from the players and take money from the players. So I think it's, I think there's definitely a spot.
Back when we started Party Poker, there was a site called Paradise Poker that nobody thought anybody could ever surpass back in those days. They had phenomenal software. They were making the most money. And nobody thought anybody could ever pass them, and yet we went sailing past them. And so it can definitely happen. And, it's not going to shock me at all one day if Party Poker retains the #1 spot in the online poker community.
Yeah, Tom Banis in the chat. What's up, Tom Puppy? Says, what is Mike's? And I'm curious about this, too, because I've been doing a lot of research for a new show we're doing tomorrow. Oh, yeah, I should have said at the beginning, tomorrow, guys, we're doing a show, me and Doug Polk. Going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern time. It'll be every Wednesday, called Table Talk, and we'll basically be going over all the relevant current online live poker topics and kind of happenings in poker, and this is one of the things we have on there, actually. What's your thoughts on the U.S. market right now in terms of the sites that are legalized and future legislation in some of the newer sites, or some of the newer states, rather, like California, for example?
Well, it's so irritating to me that states haven't incorporated online poker. I just can't even tell you how hypocritical it is to me that you can go in a casino and play poker all day, and then you can't even go back in your own house and play, And it's just absurd to me. And not even because I'm a poker lover. It's more about, individual freedoms and rights of individuals, that who is the government to tell a person what they can do in the privacy of their own home when they're not hurting anybody else? And some people like to go to extravagant dinners. Some people like to shop. Some people like to take vacations. Well, millions of people, when they work, like to come home and play a $20 online satellite where they might win $1,000. And that's what people like to do. It's entertainment. Instead of going to the movies, they might rather stay and play online poker. And it doesn't make sense to me why they don't pass it, because so many people want to play and would like to do it. And those that don't like to do it don't have to. But the revenues that would be generated from the tax base would provide better highways, more pay for the police, the fire department, teachers, whatever they might want to use that money for in that state. And it just doesn't make sense to me why anyone would be against it.
Yeah, I've been reading up about the California situation, and it seems it's very interesting. It's very weird how it works, where the Indian tribes kind of control a lot of what actually happens or doesn't happen, and I don't know. It doesn't seem very optimistic for California in the near future, maybe in a couple years. But everything that I'm reading makes it seem like there's a pretty big disconnect between the Indian tribes and between lawmakers.
No, it's so true. The tribes have all the power in the gaming world now, it seems like, and I think it's totally unfair that Indian tribes, on Indian land, have casinos that have full casinos where they have slot machines and blackjack and everything else, and other areas, that are in regular districts, for example, where they have poker room, like the Commerce Casino, like the Bicycle Club, like these kind of casinos, they're not allowed to have slots. They're not allowed to have certain gaming, environments there, and they pay way, way more taxes, and the whole thing is just weird to me. But it's the power of the Indians, and they've developed it, and honestly, in California for sure, they hold the reins, and until they get cut in big time on online poker, it's probably not going to pass there, and it's very sad, because California itself would be like the third largest country in the world for online poker, just as an individual state. That's how big it is, and how many players would play there. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of sad. But I think if California would come on board, if Pennsylvania comes on board, if a couple other states would come on board, you would see a domino effect, because other states would be sitting back saying, "Hey, why are we missing out on that revenue? We're crazy. We should get in on that too." And then they would get it as well. So that's what I think would happen. And it's sad to me that it hasn't happened yet. I keep thinking it will happen. I'm shocked. I understand election years, nothing's ever going to happen in the political world. But now that the election's over with, you think by next year or the year after, something could definitely happen and get done. But, those that fight it, a guy like Adelson that put so much money, behind politicians that say if they support online gaming, he's not going to put any money in their accounts. Mm-hmm. They want to get reelected, so they do what he says. It's horrible, in my opinion, that he's such a hypocrite, honestly, that it's okay for people to go in his casino and lose their money, but he doesn't want them to go online and lose it. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Trust me, anybody that wants to get broke, gambling, can do so any way they want to. You can go to racetracks and lose all your money. You can go to casinos and lose all your money. You can lose it to bookmakers. At some point, there are going to be people in online poker or online gaming for sure. They're going to overindulge and lose more than they should lose. But the truth is, it's all about individual responsibility. You've got to be responsible for your own actions. And that small sliver of percent of people that aren't responsible for their own action, the rest of us shouldn't be penalized for that, mm-hmm. because, they make bad choices. It's like people, that, in the healthcare world, people that abuse themselves by eating too much and not caring for their bodies, so they have more health problems than the healthy person, and you're paying for it because they're not taking care of themselves, and it's just the way of the world, but eventually you got to be responsible for your own actions, and it doesn't matter whether you're in online gaming or whether you're just banking or living a normal life. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You got to be responsible for yourself and your own actions, and it's up to you not to overindulge in anything. And I don't care what it is, whether it's going to sex clubs, whether it's people become addicted at online spending, and shopping online, and nobody's out there to curb them. So it doesn't make any sense why online poker is being picked on. That it's a bad thing, so to speak, because just too many people, millions and millions and millions of people would love to do it, and especially if it was legal and regulated. Mm-hmm. And if that happens, then you're going to see another splurge, like we saw the first go-round. It won't be nearly as great, of course, because players are so much better now than they were back in the day where the games were so good back then. But it's still something that I believe would benefit the states, would benefit the federal government. And, I've always said, and it may sound crazy to some people, but the U.S. is in such debt. We owe so much money, trillions of dollars, that if they were smart, in my opinion, they would open up, a U.S. bookie joint, where you have to bet at their sites, and any bookmakers found booking action would go to jail automatically. And they could have an online poker site that they managed, and everybody would play on it, and they'd get all the money. And now, maybe you couldn't do it because of free trade or something, but, it would certainly help get them out of debt, I can promise you that. If they had all the sports action in the country and all the online gaming world in the company, in the world, they could do pretty well.
Maybe they do. Maybe it's like the CIA with the drug trade back in the day with narcos. I mean, maybe they do own the biggest books.
Yeah.
We don't even we might not know.
Yeah. So, but no, I just think that it's just crazy to me that politicians can't see it. But I blame the casinos originally back in the day. All these casino executives supposed to be the smartest people in the gambling world. How they didn't recognize that a company like Party Poker, for example, was making more money than any brick-and-mortar casino in the country, any of them, all those Las Vegas casinos and all the rest. Party Poker was making more than all of them per day, and they could have easily had laws passed where people could gamble online when they got back home. For example, whether it was a Bellagio or a Caesar's Palace, you come out there, you register, and now when you go home, you can play blackjack online, you can play poker online at that casino property, where they're going to make 2-3 times as much money from their online site as they would make from the brick-and-mortar site. And now a guy plays 20 hours or 40 hours a month, gets a free weekend back in Las Vegas, comped at the casino, where you got them coming and going. How they couldn't see that, and how they didn't get that done, where they could have snapped their fingers and had it passed back in those days, and it would have just taken off, and they'd had to, they could have never undone it once it was done. And it just shocks me to this day that these geniuses, so-called geniuses in the gaming world, didn't see the light there when they could see how much money Party Poker was making, for example, back then. And they could have done the same thing and made way more, incidentally, if you had a casino site. Because in an online poker site, they only get the rake. They only get a portion of the pot. But if you have a customer that loses $1,000 on the blackjack tables, the casino gets the entire $1,000. If he loses $1,000 at the online poker table, they're probably only going to get $40 of that money. So, it's just crazy to me that they couldn't see the light and didn't get the laws passed before the government stepped in and stopped them.
Well, that kind of seems like what PokerStars is doing right now, where they're trying to basically change what poker really is, and they're trying to make it more of gamble, more of sports betting, more of casino, more of bring in these new players who aren't familiar with what poker's been historically and introduce them to poker as what their version of poker is, with these fast formats and these high rake structure and more of a fun element than actual you can win money element. And it seems like they are essentially kind of see how much money is there, and they're trying to make as much money as they possibly can off of their product.
Yeah, well, you can't blame them for that, and you can't blame any company for trying to make maximum money if people want a product that they'll pay for. So, you don't blame them against that, but, they're restricted. I mean, it's frustrating, for me and those of us at Party Poker, where we had to leave the U.S., where PokerStars and Full Tilt but Full Tilt didn't because they weren't publicly traded companies and they didn't think they were doing anything wrong. So they kept going, and they lasted 5 more years. They didn't get shut down until 2011. And, I just think how much money Party Poker could have made in that time. You're talking another $4 or $5 billion. Had we stayed operating at that time and then before we left the country. But we were doing what the government told us to do. They came back in and were legalized. When they said Nevada started first and then New Jersey, and Party Poker came back in New Jersey, where we're legal now. And just unfortunately, they were expecting, like everybody else was expecting, that all the other states would adopt online poker as well, where you'd have a nice, successful business again. And unfortunately, the markets they've selected as being legalized, Nevada and New Jersey, are just small states where you don't have a big database of players to play on, and so there's not that many games, and it's not that profitable of a business, limiting yourself to just those tiny little states.
Yeah, that's true. It's I haven't kept up too much with the traffic on those sites, but yeah, as you mentioned, the states are just small. The player pool is small, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really hear much about legalized online poker. I hear a lot about non-legalized online poker sites, but I don't hear too much about the actual sites in Nevada and New Jersey right now.
No, all the online sites that are legitimate, all the big ones, would definitely want to be legalized and regulated, happy to pay their taxes, and, have a business where customers, are willing and happy to come to, where they're not afraid that they're going to get busted or not afraid that they're going to get paid. And, the scandal that Full Tilt went through was just horrid. I mean, it just sickens my stomach, and the damage it did to our industry and the online gaming industry, where, they were holding the players' money, and then they spent the players' money and used it for advertising and paid the shareholders, and didn't have it for the players to pay them back. They should have never been using players' money for all that kind of stuff. And, it's incredible to me nobody really went to jail over that. And what a black eye that gave the online gaming industry. And I think that plays a big role in why it's never been legalized in other states, because it's got such a black eye in terms of that kind of thing that Full Tilt pulled off. So it's frustrating.
Yeah, I mean,
and it really been frustrating for me as a player, had I had money on the site, and couldn't get it back. And, I mean, people praise PokerStars because they bail them out and pay the players back. Well, believe me, PokerStars bailed them out so they could get their own neck out of the noose and get back in the U.S. themselves, and that's why they struck a deal with the Department of Justice. So, they weren't really doing it for the benefit of the players. They were doing it for their own benefit as well.
Do you talk to any of the Full Tilt guys? Are you friendly with them, or is it something that with what happened, you just don't want to be associated with them?
No. I mean, those guys, most are old school poker players, and, I'm still friends with them and talk to them. And, I don't think they had any ill intentions, honestly. They just thought the parade was never going to end.
Yeah.
And therefore, they were paying themselves extravagant shareholder money every month, and they spent a fortune on advertising, as we know. And it just took their money, but they never thought the gravy train would stop in terms of all the income coming in every day that they were making. And, it was big money every day. And, so when that's coming in every day, you don't think it's going to stop. So, poker players, they're never going to all pull their money out at once if the site is going strong and going well like it was. So, once they pull the plug all at one time and everybody wants their money back at once, they didn't have it to pay them, and it was a shame and very unfortunate that it gave such a black eye to the industry, and it was very sad. And, a lot of those guys are friends of mine, and I felt bad for them. But, most of them, had no access over how the company was run and what was going on, really. There's only a few at the top that did. And so those are the guys you probably got to hold responsible.
Yeah. I'll give a couple of shout-outs here. Mike, you want to give anybody a shout-out that might be listening?
Oh, no, not necessarily. I'm just happy anybody's listening, and, we're grateful for everybody that takes in poker podcasts and, likes to learn things about the history of poker, for example. And as I mentioned earlier, I wrote a book called Life's a Gamble, and certainly it tells the history of the first 30 years of the World Series of Poker. There's stories in there you never know about. It tells about online poker and how it got started, how party poker started, how the World Poker Tour got started. Also chapters on the icons in the poker world. Chip Reese, Doyle Bunsen, Puggy Pearson, Stu Ungar, Billy Baxter. All those guys got their own chapters in the book, and you'll hear some real gambling stories about those guys. And I just happen to be the link between the old school players and the new players of today. So really, I'm one of the few guys that have the perspective that's still alive. Honestly, they can tell the stories that happened, and they're all true stories in the book. And it's just a fun, entertaining read, and definitely you'll learn a lot about the history of poker by reading this book also.
People in the chat, they keep asking about Stu Ungar stories.
Yeah, there's a lot of them in the book, and they're fun. But this guy, I believe he's the Bobby Fischer of poker. A genius IQ, just incredible, and photographic memory, and just had the quickest mind of anybody that I've ever seen. And and honestly, as great as he was at No Limit Hold'em, and I believe he was the greatest No Limit Hold'em player ever, he was even far better at gin rummy. And I don't believe you'll ever find one gin rummy player in the world that ever played him or saw him play that would ever deny that he wasn't heads and tails at gin rummy above everybody else, and it wasn't even close. I mean, he was playing gin rummy for the Mafia when he was 16 years old, and, you know, never had a job in his life. Money always came easy to him. He came to Las Vegas to play gin rummy, not to play high-stakes poker. And he played all the high-stakes poker, and believe me, back in those days, every one of the high-stakes poker players were phenomenal gin rummy players. Danny Robinson, Chip Reese, Puggy Pearson, Sarge Ferris, Billy Baxter, Tommy Fisher, Doyle Brunson. All those guys were superstar gin rummy players, and he came out here and mowed them down like grass, you know, and he'd have to put them on in 3 games, and he'd have to let them see the bottom card on the deck and the bottom 2 card, and it didn't matter. He just mowed them down and just beat them all like crazy until they quit playing him. And then, you know, he started playing in the highest stakes poker games because he couldn't get any more gin action, honestly, and that's how his poker came about, you know, really out here in Vegas. But there's some really good stories about him in the book that you'll thoroughly enjoy. Anybody likes Stu Ungar will certainly like some of those stories.
I actually have an idea I'm going to talk to you about after the show's over, but let me give a couple shout-outs here real quick. Let me see what we got out here. Hans Van, I lost my voice. I don't have a voice. Hans Van Woo, I don't know how to say that name. Joseph Park, Nasty Nate from Cincinnati. What's up, Nasty Nate? Show us some leg. I don't think Mike's going to be showing you any leg, Nasty Nate. Calm down, buddy. Come on. I'm kidding. He might show you leg. I don't know. Hit him up on Twitter or something. He might. Rose Genest. I think you're from Montreal, Rose. So I don't know if your name's Rose or Rose. But Rose earlier asked, what about the Playground Club? Was Playground Poker Club was different than other poker clubs?
Well, there's several things. Number one, it's just a poker casino. They have no blackjack, no slot machines, no roulette wheels, just poker. So that means they understand poker and they do poker right, which they do. And if you ever get to Montreal, you got to check out the Playground Poker Club because I really believe they run it as fine as anybody runs any room in the world. And they have a separate section for tournament play. They have a separate for cash game play. They have 2 private rooms for big games where you have your own waitress, your own cashier, and the restaurant's fantastic. But just to give you an example, in the tournament area, a couple of things that I've seen that they have there that nobody else does. And on the back of every dealer's chair in the casino, for example, there's a pole that goes up the back and it's got lights on it. And if somebody wants service, they just whisper to the dealer, you know, service, and the dealer punches the button, and the light comes on, and in 1 minute's time, somebody's over there getting their order. And if they need a floor man, it's a different colored light, and they push it, and the floor man's right over it. But nobody's hollering out service, you know, floor man, and screaming that across like you do in every other casino, and I really love that aspect of their casino. In the tournament area, they did something that I've never seen done anywhere. I've been all over the world. And you know how you play a tournament where you're breaking tables down, you know, from 100 players to 90 players to 80 players? Well, as soon as the tables break down in the tournament area, not one, but 2 people over there, they wipe off every chair, they wipe off the table, they clean the table, and I mean within 5 minutes after that table's broke down, it's already cleaned and ready to go again for the next tournament and the next time they use that table. So, you know, it's just the cleanliness. The restrooms are the cleanest you'll find in any casino in the world. And, you know, you just appreciate that as a player, and I appreciate that. Now, obviously, because I've now won in Montreal, it's even become more of my favorite casino. So, you know, you always have fond memories as a poker player where you won. And people always ask me, where's your best favorite places on the world? Where's the best places to play? Well, as a poker player, your favorite places are where you had the most success. And years ago, I had the most success at Foxwoods as a player, and in Paris as a player. So those 2 were my favorite places. And now it's probably going to be Montreal for a while.
I like it, man. It sounds like Montreal, the Playground, could really give some coaching to the World Series of Poker and how to, I don't know, World Series, whatever, World Series Poker.
They do a wonderful job. I mean, the problem with Montreal, it's on a Kanawake Gaming Indian Reservation, and it's about a 20-minute ride from downtown Montreal. And if you've never been to Montreal, it's a really beautiful city, fantastic restaurants, and it's a great city. But, you know, you have to go back and forth. It's 20 minutes to get out there and 20 minutes to get back if you stay in town. And, you know, that's the one downside of it. As you know, as a poker player or something, even if you're playing in the cash game or whatever, a tournament, you know, on the breaks you want to go up to your room, you know, for a few minutes. But, you know, it's tough to do in Montreal. So, basically, when you go to the Playground Poker Club, you're there for the whole day. and then when you leave, you're gone till tomorrow, basically. So, that's one of the downsides of it, but there's a lot of upsides in terms of how to run a poker room.
Let me see what else we got. Cam Bolts. What's up, Cam? Blind Bird. What is your question, Blind Bird? This is actually a question. I mean, please ask Mike, is a hot dog a sandwich or not?
Is a hot dog a sandwich or not? I say yes.
I think a hot dog is a sandwich too. I agree. Let me take a couple more questions from the chat, guys.
Anything that's on a bun is a sandwich.
What do you say?
If it's on, I said anything that's on bread or a bun is a sandwich. That's a simple way to define it.
I think so. We got a Philly cheesesteak sandwich. It's pretty much on a very similar bun as a hot dog, so I don't know how a hot dog wouldn't be considered a sandwich in that spot. Let me see. Poker Heine says, not sure anybody knows more about the poker world than Mike. Mike, do you know the most about the poker world?
Oh, I don't know if I know the most, but, when you've been around as long as I have and you've seen all I've seen, then, it's experience and age that gives you all that resume, I suppose. But, I've just been very blessed in my career that, when I was going to Vegas in the early days, even before I was any kind of high-stakes player at all, that I had access to the high-stakes players. And, so I knew what was going on in the big-stakes world. I became really good friends with Stu Ungar and Puggy Pearson and Doyle Brunson and all the high-stakes players. And, it's really helped me in my career in terms of, when I wanted to put on the Tournament of Champions, I had the support of all these guys. And so it's made a difference in my life. And as I said before, I'm a real good link from the old school days of the 70s when the World Series started up into today because I'm still doing the World Poker Tour. So, there's not many people that have that link and have that access and have been around that long. So, it's just the longevity that gives me an edge over most in terms of knowing the poker world better than most.
Nightly Slash says, hey, Joey, please ask Mike what his best final table broadcast was, or who are some of the more memorable players of the last couple of years that you called at a final table?
Well, my favorite broadcast probably of all time, I think was like in season 2, and it was when Doyle Brunson won the Legends of Poker. And Doyle was the first WSOP main event winner, of course, and Hall of Fame member that's playing out on the World Poker Tour. And I was real good friends with him. And to see him win the Legends of Poker at 72 years of age was just very exciting. He's still the oldest player to ever win a WPT event. And now, as a little trivia, I'm probably the second oldest guy that's ever won a WPT event. So, Doyle still got me by a couple of years there. But, hopefully I'll keep playing and I can pass him up at his age and win another one sometime. Who knows? But that was one of my favorite events. A WPT World Championship event, was always fun for a couple times. But we've had a lot of really, really good final tables, with Daniel Negreanu and Antonio Esfandiari and Phil Ivey and, all the legends in the poker world has made it very exciting for us in terms of broadcasting. And Vince and I are poker players at heart, and we love watching final tables just like the viewers love watching them. And obviously, when you get the big names, when you get action-oriented players at the final table, like a Michael the Grinder Mizrachi, like a Gus Hansen, like a Phil Ivey, those are the kind of players that we like watching too, the ramming and jamming players. And when you get young guys at 3 and 4 bet before the flop and give action, they're the fun ones to watch. Nobody likes watching rocks and, in a boring final table, so to speak. But if you get a couple guys that can fire it up and are willing to make moves, if you just remember the main event of the World Series this year playing heads up, that was the most astonishing heads up battle I've ever witnessed because of the plays that WIN guy was making. It was just amazing to watch, I thought, and the guy showed so much heart and honestly deserved to win. So, you can never take it away from him. But, he wasn't winning with aces and kings. He was winning any 2 cards. And that's the sign of a really good player is somebody, as we define as a great poker player, who is not afraid to play a pot, but also not afraid to try to win a pot even when they don't flop anything, where they can just take the pot away on a bluff. And, you got to have heart to be a top-tier poker player. And, obviously all the top-tier players do show a lot of heart, and they do have it.
Do you write your own stuff on World Poker Tour, or does somebody write all these things for you?
Nobody's ever written one line for Vince and I in the 15-year career. We don't have any written material. We just do it all on our own. I wish somebody would write some stuff for us. We're probably saying some of the same things over now. So anybody out there that's got anything, please tweet me or write me and give me some good lines. There's something good out there, and I promise you I'll put it on the air.
Guys, if you guys are interested, make sure you get in touch with Mike. Give him some suggestions. Give him some. Give me suggestions, too, on what to say. I love, believe me, you tell me make what I'm doing easier, I'm in. Like, I definitely want that.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, you guys come up with some really, like, I don't know how you come, like, the puns and the jokes. I'm like, man, where do they come up with this stuff from, dude? I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, well, it's always fun when you have a couple businessmen at the table. Because whatever businessmen, that there are, like, we've had dentists on there, and we've had lawyers on there, and we've had, people that own various a pizza parlor, so
the pizza man putting his sauce on the pizza right now, and he's going to raise it up.
Right. Yeah. So it's fun. You get all that when you have somebody that has a job, but when you get all poker players that have no jobs, now it gets a little bit tougher. So that's where I need some help out there, people. Send me some good lines.
Yeah, send them some good lines about the poker players. Maybe you could, I guess you comment how quiet they are. I got to think of some. I don't know, man. I don't know. Some of the things Vince says about these jobs are awesome, man. The businessman coming in, bulldozing over the table just like he does at his construction site. Man, it's
yeah.
I like it, man.
No, it's really fun, and the World Poker Tour gives us a little bit of leeway like that. So, the WPT has just been so great for poker. Every poker player, every night, especially those guys making a living playing poker, should say a prayer every night and thank the World Poker Tour for coming into existence, because it truly changed the poker world forever. It was the WPT that put poker on in prime time on a weekly basis on the Travel Channel. The first 5 years we had the World Poker Tour, and we were their number one show for all 5 years, and it just took off from the beginning and has been so popular. And there's not many TV shows that last 15 years, and here we are still going strong, and just signed another 4-year contract with Fox Sports. So, we're going to be around for a while, and it's just great to see. And I just hope the players appreciate and understand the history and what the World Poker Tour did to change the poker world forever, because it really did.
Mike, any last words to the people? You want to tell them, give them a parting thought, maybe give them one piece of life advice they can maybe go out on and think about here as we wrap up the podcast?
Well, obviously, when you're playing any kind of poker game, you have to play at a comfortable level. You can't play where you're intimidated by the money that you're playing with. And if you are, then you're playing in a game probably too high for you. You need to drop back down. Because it doesn't matter what the stakes are, you should essentially, play the same kind of game where you're not afraid to make a 3-bet. If you think you can take the pot away from somebody, you're not afraid to bluff. But what happens is if you play up in higher stakes, and now the money means more to you, you don't make that bluff that you might make at a lower limit for a lower amount of money. And it shouldn't restrict you in your play. And if it does, then it affects you. And certainly, I'd recommend those that like playing tournament poker, if you can't really afford the buy-ins and you don't know somebody that'll take a share of you, just try playing satellites to get in them. Try 2 satellites per event. If you don't get in, you don't get in. But I know one thing. You have to not be afraid to reach out to grab the brass ring if you really want to make it big in any aspect of life, and poker is no different than that. So, you got to be in it to win it, as they say, and certainly I'd recommend anybody at least playing satellites if your dream and goal is to make it big time in the poker world, and you want a bracelet or you want a WPT title or you just want big money. And, but you work your way up. Experience pays dividends in the poker world like anything else, and you have to learn as you're going along. And believe me, I can promise you, I don't care how long you've been playing, once you stop learning at poker, once your learning curve ceases to exist, you're just going to go down from there. Because you can always learn, certainly even if you think you know everything about the game, you can always learn more about the opponents that are at your table, and always study them and learn their traits and trademarks. So, there's always more to be learned at the poker table. So that's my advice. Never stop trying to learn and getting better.
Amen. Guys, if you want to follow Mike, he's on Twitter. I believe it's WPT Mike Sexton. You can search Mike Sexton. You'll be able to find him on there. And the book that he has out is called Life's a Gamble. Obviously, if you enjoyed these stories, I'm sure you will enjoy the book. I am going to personally check out the book. I'm actually I'll probably write something up about the book too, and I'll kind of do something. I got something in mind actually that I came up with throughout the show. So, because I'd really like to learn more about.
Yeah, you can go.
What's up?
You can go to Amazon.com, and you can also get the audio version of the book.
Who reads? Do you read the audio version of the book?
I do the audio version. Yeah, so you can hear me telling the stories, and
Nice.
some people write and tell me that they've listened to the audio version 3 different times. They love it so much, and it's just so much fun to listen to. And I think it's even cheaper than the book. So it's that's another way that you can get it. If you're not into reading, you can listen to it when you're on a flight, when you're in the car, anything. You download it right on your phone. It's just fantastic.
And you get to hear your voice.
Check that out, audio.com.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The voice thing sounds.
And you get to hear me tell the stories in my own voice.
That's awesome, man. Guys.
So there you go. That's what I'd recommend. And, I promise you, you won't regret getting it. I guarantee you that. And I even enjoy rereading the book now, and I wrote it. And I still like the stories, and I still like to read it.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Guys, I'm going to be back. I'll be back tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern. Me and Doug Polk, Table Talk, brand new show. Later this week, new episode of Can I Win $500,000 at Pot Limit Omaha. My debut episode came out last week. A lot of people enjoyed it. This episode will be out sometime this week. We got Thanksgiving Thursday. Mike, when's the final table going to be on TV? Montreal.
It's probably not going to be on until the end of February or March, I believe. I'm not sure of the dates yet, but I think there's going to be a few events on first. So my guess is it won't be till March, probably the middle of March or later. But it'll be an exciting time, and believe me, that'll be one you want to watch, because our heads-up battle was really quite a battle. I'm telling you, we played a long time, and this guy was very tough, and Benny Chen was his name, and I was fortunate to come out on top. So, but it was a great battle, and it'll be a great show, and I can't wait to see it myself.
Do you get to commentate on it too?
No, Tony Dunn took my place in the booth, so him and Vince will be doing all the commentating, but I'll be sitting back and watching it, and I'm sure I will enjoy it, since I get the trophy and the goodies at the end. So it'll be fun.
That's awesome. Mike, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Enjoy your time in rainy Punta Cana. And thank you.
All right. I appreciate it.
Much love, Mike.
Glad to join you. Do it anytime. Thank you,
sir. Guys in the chat.
Bye.